Now, due to everything that's happening in my real life right now, this will be this session I'm doing right now is my very last Q&A session. That's one of the reasons I really wanted to get it done tonight and be done with it. Basically, I don't want to stop, and it is possible in the future that I'll have the ability to keep doing these Q&As and these reviews and all these videos. But at the moment, my goal is to get the three big reviews. I shouldn't even call them three, but the three major review things I want to get out. Which, for anyone who has missed it, would be Zelda Skyward Sword, Diablo 1 through 3, and Mass Effect 1 through 3. And these are the big reviews I am going to make happen, dang it. Uh, but in summary, um, I am simply going to either be not working here anymore in the future due to the fact that management. Well, let's just not say anything about that because I have nothing kind to say about that. And the availability of doing this at home is not going to happen, even with the additional time I'll have. And I don't know where I'm going to be going next job-wise. And so the general point here is that this is all kind of going to be up in the air. But so this is the last Q&A, the one I just did, and I do apologize for the fact that I just started trailing off at the end. I have been very stressed and very tired lately, and I do apologize. If I had my way, I would continue answering every question that was posed to me because I do find 90% of these questions engaging and interesting, and I do like to share this tiny little sliver of my life with these other people and share in the slivers of their lives as well. So I do apologize for all of this. Now, there are four last questions, and I'm going to go ahead and answer these. These four are a little bit segregate of the other ones. Actually, it's technically six. Excuse me. Um, hang on just a second here. I actually lost one of the questions because I'm apparently the most retarded person in the world. Where did they go? Shoot. Whatever. Oh, here it is. God. I am apparently stupid. I just was spelling differently. Alright. Several of these questions have to do with the extended storyline of the Empire I mentioned, and one of the questions has to do with Star Wars, one of the questions has to do with Kingdom Hearts, and the last question, and I am going to go ahead and do this question actually first, because I imagine most people who are watching these videos is looking for the answer to this question. What do I think about the Mass Effect 3 DLC as it, the interview that they've done, the fact that it's been released and all that stuff? The extended cut DLC happening in 3 days at this point. So, now, I almost feel bad for saying this. I had several requests from several people in private messages and mostly in private messages from people asking me to do a separate video specifically talking about what I thought about the DLC and all that. Unfortunately, this is not going to happen, and the reason why is because nothing I would have to say about the DLC, the extended cut DLC, is anything different from anything I have already said about it. I already did a whole video about it previously when I was doing the previous Mass Effect 3 videos, and I have mentioned it several times in Q&As, both in this Q&A and previous ones. I have nothing new to add. If anything, I feel, most unfortunately, that I'm going to be correct and that the DLC is not going to fix anything, is not going to be better in any noticeable fashion. Yes, it will be better, but as I've said, stabbing yourself in the eye with a pencil would probably be better than that ending, so not exactly particularly enthused. I will, however, be playing through it. I will do a short video of my thoughts on the DLC specifically, and then I will go ahead and go forward with the Mass Effect 3 review as a whole, as I had been planning to do from the beginning. That being said, let's go on to the next question here. And I just want to add, by the way, I do find it amusing. This is not saying anything negative, but as counted up, I had 42 people, or rather specific comments, questions, and statements in my various videos and in my message box, all saying, did you know this is coming out? What do you think of it? Did you know this is coming out? What do you think of it? Apparently, a lot of people wanted my thoughts on that, and I do apologize that my thoughts are somewhat threadbare, but I really just don't have anything else to add, and we'll see in a few days. So, Kingdom Hearts question: who is your favorite incarnation of Xehanort? By the way, spoiler alert: anyone who hasn't played the Kingdom Hearts series, go away. Now, or who is intending to, I should say, because that series is very easy to spoil, just like the Assassin's Creed series. Now, that's actually a tough one because my immediate reaction would be basically all three, at least all three that I'm aware of. I know that there's a fourth in 3D. Unfortunately, I already accidentally spoiled that for myself. But all for different reasons. For example, Xehanort the original was a certain brand of complete monster, of a true villain who is just unremorseful in his actions and is just an evil individual who is set about to do whatever it takes and destroy everything in his path in order to obtain his own personal goals and to heck with everyone else, right? The reason I like him in that incarnation is not only is that an interesting type of villain when pulled off right, but it was voiced by Leonard Nimoy. And forgive me, but he is Xehanort's voice. If not for Leonard Nimoy, that would not have fly at all. He did a beautiful job of the role. The next one I would pick would be, of course, Ansem the Seeker of Darkness, who was a beautiful example of someone who was, while certainly evil, unlike the original Xehanort, he was not evil in any way anywhere near the same type of way. He was obsessed. That particular incarnation, Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness, was purely focused on his goal and was so absolutely strong in his belief that he was right about darkness and about the true nature of the heart, that is what ultimately led him to his downfall. And that sort of unflinching belief. He was a true believer, a fanatic, if you will, in his theories and his studies, and that was again an interesting perspective of the character and an interesting side of him. Then we have Xemnas. Now, I have heard a lot of theories about Xemnas. I have my own as well, personally. I think Xemnas is not the nobody of Xehanort. Or even or even Terranort, or whatever you want to call him. I think Xemnas is the nobody of Xehanort and Terra combined, and that is why Xemnas is, to put simply, insane. Because Xemnas was insane. He was absolutely powerful, he was absolutely brilliant, and he was unhinged, and he was disturbed, and he would just go and everything he was after, everything he was about was just wrong. It was, and what I don't mean wrong as in morally wrong. I mean there was something off about what he did and everything he functioned as. And I believe that is because he is a nobody of two individuals compressed into a single individual in a way that was never meant to be happened. And that's absolutely fascinating to me. And of course, I love his fighting style, which is just unrelated, but I just feel like mentioning that. So that would be my thoughts. If I had to pick, I'd still go ahead and go for Xemnas, but that's just because he's a nobody, and we nobodies have to stick together, you know. Now, the Star Wars question I mentioned. If you were the director of the next Star Wars movie, where would you take them to? Would it be another prequel? Would it be a direct sequel to Return of the Jedi? Or something set further into the future? Would Luke and his people still be the main focus, or would you bring in new protagonists? Where would the story go, and what would you add to Star Wars as a whole? There are three directions I could see going in this, and I would spend long, long nights debating this with myself and my friends, and the people whose creative opinions I trust. But I'll go ahead and discuss all three options here. One is, of course, a prequel, and when I say a prequel, I mean going back to the Old Republic era. Not the prequel Old Republic era. Going back a century or two or three or five. Really going back and setting the movie in that era. Probably creating another story whole cloth, very similar to what KOTOR did, basically, and using that as the basis for the movie. That's one option. Second option would be to do the immediate sequel. That is, and when I say immediate, I basically mean the Hand of Thrawn trilogy, to be completely honest with you. I have often hoped that they would do the Hand of Thrawn trilogy in movie format. For books that massive and that expansive, it would be very difficult to translate into a single movie. But if I was given leeway, budget, and time to make a full trilogy, I would actually do a trilogy of the Hand of Thrawn trilogy, and I think I could pull that off rather well, and I would really enjoy working on that. And of course, the third option is naturally to take any one of the many gaps in the existing story post Return of the Jedi, and there are a few gaps there, not very big ones because the books cover a lot of that, but there are a few gaps where you have an option to have a story and do something with one of those. And again, this would effectively be inventing a new story whole cloth. But actually, as I'm thinking about that right now, I take it back completely. I know what I would like to do. A generational game, a generational movie, one that covers the progression of the books from Truce at Bakura all the way up to the Hand of Thrawn duology, and covers all of what happened after Return of the Jedi, and all of the changes of the galaxy, all the differences that made the Republic and the Empire finally making peace. You know, the abolishment of so many of the Dark Jedi, Palpatine's final death. You know, there's so many things that really could work in that era, and I would really love to work with into a movie format. Now, the last three videos here are all regarding my personal storyline of the Empire, which if you don't want to hear about, feel free to cancel the video here, because that's all this is. The rest of this is going to be about. I'm sorry, I'm really starting to lose focus. The first question is the simplest. Has the Empire ever interfered militarily? Yes, it has. Specific examples are hard to come by, but suffice it to say, let me give you a theoretical example. Let's say there's this planet that is at war with this one nation is at war with this other nation. Now, let's say this first nation, let's say both nations have appealed to the Empire and said, you know, we seek military aid against the other. The Empire would say, no, we're not going to fight your war for you. The two sides then start employing the types of weapons they shouldn't on one another, the equivalent of nuclear weapons, for example. So when they use nuclear weapons or something of equivalent massive destruction upon one another, the Empire then does intervene militarily and stops those forces and says, no, you are not a member of the Empire, but we're not going to allow you to destroy your own civilians simply because you cannot settle these matters. And the Empire would then impose a bit of a military curfew, I guess is the best way to put it in the situation, and try and resolve things diplomatically. If things were not capable of being resolved diplomatically, which is a possibility, the Emperor would say, fine, we are not going to tell you you cannot war against each other, but you cannot destroy your own planet. That is going over the line. So we are going to leave an imperial presence here, a military presence, which is going to step in the moment you try to step over that line. Another example would be something like from the Star Control series, where someone is like, "Hey, you know, this massive, incredibly powerful force is trying to take over and/or destroy the galaxy, depending on which force it is, and we need assistance, and so we humbly request, you know, blah 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 blah." And under most circumstances, the Empire would then intervene. And it is worth noting that in most circumstances where the Empire intervenes in a world's development or society or whatever, it is actually militarily. The Bastion and the Hands and the Elements deal with the really difficult cases, either because they're complicated, or they're tricky, or they're fragile, or they involve the kind of things that a fleet of ships can't deal with. So yes, the Empire does interfere militarily, and has done so on many occasions. The next question is apparently, I never actually noticed this before. This is actually the same question, just two people different asked this. Would you consider making a video exclusively about the Bastion and the Imperial storyline? I find it extremely interesting and would like to hear about it, even if it's just a small period of time in terms of story. That would be an interesting undertaking, because this is a story I've been writing in my head since I was young. This has been a decades, plural, process that I've been working on. And granted, I've gotten a little more organized about it in recent years, but there would be so much to discuss and so much to debate. But suffice it to say, I would consider doing a video, and I will still consider doing a video. I can't do that now. I don't have the time. But in extremely summarized terms, what happened was, on what is referred to as Old Earth, which is the original planet, a number of individuals finally went through a process known as the arisal, which involved them all basically abandoning the system, abandoning the planet, and going off in search of a different and new life. And in the process, they discovered, you know, things that were considered out of bounds at the time. You know, alien life, magical type things, new forms of technology, you know, all this thing. And from this hegemony, you know, from this collective of different people and different species, it just started to grow and grow and grow until it reached the point where it became the very beginnings of what is now known as the Empire. And the empire has never actually stopped expanding because this whole policy of continued growth, of finding new people and helping them join the galactic community, has never actually stopped for millennia upon millennia. And what's one of the reasons when I say this is something that is a galaxial cluster spanning empire. This is something that is larger than anything I've ever heard of in fiction, for example. I've never seen anything else that gets this big. And so that's basically how it all started. And, the Bastion specifically was started by a specific individual who who was a nobody, as my version of a nobody, as I have expressed before. It's a little different than the Kingdom Hearts nobody. My version of the nobody uh, lost his heart and lost his soul and lost his essence and changed and became a new creature, and in the process of doing so, discovered ways of functioning and existing that others hadn't existed, and began to view time in a more nonlinear fashion, and so forth and so on. And with the sheer level of direct reality altering power that granted him, that enabled him to deal with situations that were much more delicate. An army moving in to try and settle a situation is much more volatile and much less likely to succeed than one individual who can show up as a member of that people or as someone who is amongst them and try to work from within in order to help them settle their differences, in order to help solve whatever their problems are. And so that's where the Bastion sort of came from, was him and the other nobodies, such as himself, can't have a sufficient power of an individual level in order to be able to withstand uh, de- being the good guys on an individual level in individual circumstances. And of course, the hands came about because the Empire began recruiting beings of tremendous power. We're talking about wide scale power, moving planets kind of power. And there are certain things that were found within the multiverse that simply were requiring of that level of capacity in order to deal with something of that simple scope, that scale, that size. And so the hands slowly began to band together, more or less unofficially, until the Emperor officially gave, writ, okay, we're going to form this organization and call you the Hands because you are the hands of the Empire. You are the ones who do what no one else can do. You are the ones who deal with situations that are galaxy threatening, To use an immediate example of something that nobody probably ever heard of, but Imperius from the DC Comics series, who is a galaxy eater. That kind of thing would be something that a hand would step in and stop, because that sheer level of scope and scale and problem is something that a being like a hand would have to deal with. Now, again, this is an extreme summary, and there's so much more I could go into, and because this, like I said, this storyline has been around since forever, and there are so many characters involved, not all good, you know, but there are some individuals opposed to the Empire who are of the power level of the hands that I just mentioned, and these are known as, for example, there are the aspects, which are hatred, madness, decay, and pain. All four of them are very different from one another. All came from the same source, actually, and all four of them do regularly do what they can in order to I wouldn't say hinder the Empire, because that's not the point. It's more the fact that they actually believe in whatever it is they believe in, and are trying their best in order to alter reality to best suit that. Decay being an excellent example of that one, or madness. And of course, there are other individuals such as the Myriad and the Swarm, and there are many different characters and individuals and groups and organizations, and I really need to start getting some of my work done for the night, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here. And hopefully I will have time to do the Mass Effect 1 and 2 reviews tomorrow, which is the idea. So I will talk to all of you guys later.